Hello everyone, and welcome to Love Wave Story. I never imagined I would sit here one day and tell strangers about the most painful moment of my life, but sometimes silence hurts more than truth. I am a woman who believed in real love, not the loud kind, but the quiet one built from trust, routine, and shared dreams. I believed intimacy was sacred, a space where two people are completely naked not only with their bodies, but with their souls. I built my life step by step. I worked hard, I loved deeply, and when he came into my life, I thought he was the reward for all the patience and all the waiting. He was attentive, gentle, and convincing in a way that made me feel chosen. I trusted him without checking his phone, without questioning his late returns, without wondering who he texted at night. I gave him my body with love and my heart without fear. I truly believed I was safe. What I didn't know is that safety can be an illusion, and sometimes betrayal doesn't come with obvious signs, but with one small mistake that slips out when masks fall. This is the story of how one name, spoken in the most intimate moment, changed the way I see love forever. At the beginning, everything felt calm and normal, the kind of love that doesn't burn but slowly warms you from the inside. We had routines that felt comforting, shared jokes, favorite meals, and nights when the world outside disappeared. I trusted his touch, his words, and the way he looked at me like I was the only woman in the room. There were no dramatic fights, no obvious red flags, no rumors whispered by friends. If someone had told me then that betrayal was already living between us, I would have laughed and defended him. I believed that love like ours couldn't hide lies for long. Intimacy was where I felt closest to him, where I believed truth had no place to hide. In those moments, I felt desired, connected, chosen. I didn't know that sometimes people are most honest when they lose control, when their guard drops for just a second. Looking back now, I see small details I ignored, the distant look sometimes in his eyes, the way he would turn his phone face down, the sudden changes in mood. At the time, I called it stress, work, life. I wanted peace more than answers. I chose trust because it was easier than doubt, and because I was afraid that asking questions might destroy the happiness I thought we had. As months passed, our relationship settled into something that looked stable from the outside, but inside I began to feel small shifts I couldn't explain. He was still affectionate, still said the right words, but sometimes his presence felt divided, like part of him was somewhere else even when his body was with me. I told myself this was normal, that long relationships change shape, that passion matures into comfort. I wanted to be the understanding woman, the one who doesn't create drama where there is none. I adjusted myself quietly, asking for less, expecting less, convincing myself that love means patience. I remember nights when he would hold me close, yet his mind seemed far away, and I would lie awake listening to his breathing, wondering why closeness suddenly felt lonely. I never checked his messages, never followed him online, never questioned his stories. Trust was my pride, something I believed made me strong. I thought jealousy was weakness, suspicion was poison. I didn't realize that ignoring your intuition is a different kind of poison, slower but just as deadly. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice was trying to warn me, but I kept turning the volume down. I had invested too much of myself into this life, into this love, to imagine that it could be built on a lie. The tension didn't arrive as a storm, it crept in softly, disguised as tired smiles and postponed conversations. He started coming home later, explaining it with work, deadlines, responsibilities that sounded reasonable enough for me to accept without resistance. I wanted to be supportive, not suspicious. I reminded myself that love should not feel like interrogation. Still, there were moments when his touch felt rushed, when his kisses lacked presence, when intimacy became something mechanical instead of emotional. I blamed myself at first, my stress, my fatigue, my changing body, wondering if I was no longer exciting enough. I tried harder, dressed better, smiled more, became quieter. I thought love could be saved by effort, by adaptation. What I didn't understand was that I was competing with a ghost I didn't even know existed. Each time he pulled away, I stepped closer. Each time he grew distant, I grew more attached. The imbalance became our new normal, and I normalized my own discomfort because facing the truth felt too terrifying. I told myself that if betrayal ever happened, I would feel it clearly, like a sharp pain. I didn't know it could feel like confusion first, like something being off but not broken yet. And so I stayed, loving him in the dark, unaware that the light was already fading. The night everything changed didn't feel special at first. It felt ordinary, almost boring, and maybe that's why it still haunts me. We had dinner, exchanged a few words about our days, shared the same space without really connecting. Later, when the lights were off and the world narrowed down to just us, I wanted closeness more than ever, a silent reassurance that we were still us. In that intimate moment, when my guard was completely down and my heart was wide open, I heard it. Not my name. Another woman's name. It slipped from his lips naturally, effortlessly, like a habit he forgot to hide. For a second, my body froze while my mind refused to understand what had just happened. Time stretched, my heartbeat became loud, and the room felt suddenly unfamiliar. He didn't even notice at first. That hurt more than the word itself. I pulled away slowly, my voice shaking when I asked him to repeat what he said. His confusion lasted only a moment before his face changed. I will never forget that look, the realization that he had been caught not by evidence, not by questions, but by truth escaping at the worst possible moment. He tried to fix it instantly, words spilling out too fast, excuses tangled with apologies, telling me it was a mistake, a slip, nothing meaningful. But I knew in my bones that names don't come from nowhere, especially not in moments when truth is raw and unfiltered. I sat there wrapped in silence, feeling exposed in a way I never had before, like my entire relationship had just been stripped of its meaning. My mind replayed the sound of that name again and again, each time cutting deeper. I asked him who she was, and he hesitated, just long enough to give me the answer without speaking. That pause was louder than any confession. He swore it wasn't serious, that it didn't change what we had, that he loved me. But love doesn't confuse faces, and it doesn't replace names in moments meant to be sacred. I felt something inside me crack quietly, not in anger, but in grief. I wasn't just losing trust, I was losing the woman I used to be, the one who believed she was chosen without competition. That night, I realized betrayal doesn't always arrive with screaming and doors slamming. Sometimes it arrives softly, with one word spoken at the wrong time, and leaves you sitting in the dark, trying to remember who you are now. After that moment, nothing felt real anymore, like I was moving through my own life as a stranger. I watched him talk, explain, promise, but his voice sounded distant, as if it was coming from another room. My body was there, but my mind kept drifting back to that second when the name left his mouth so easily. I wondered how many times he had said it before, how many moments belonged to her that I thought were mine. Questions crowded my head, yet I felt strangely calm, the kind of calm that comes right before something breaks completely. I asked him when it started, how long I had been sharing my place in his life without knowing. He avoided details, minimized time, softened facts, and each softened word felt like a new betrayal. I realized then that lies don't stop once they are exposed, they just change their shape. That night I didn't cry immediately. I sat quietly, listening to my own breathing, realizing that the future I imagined no longer existed. The woman I was yesterday believed in forever, believed in us. The woman sitting there now understood that love can disappear not with a dramatic ending, but with a slow and humiliating awakening. The days that followed were heavy and unreal, like living underwater where every movement requires effort. I went to work, answered messages, smiled at people, but inside I was replaying every memory, searching for clues I had missed. I remembered moments that once felt sweet and now felt staged, affectionate gestures that suddenly seemed borrowed from another story. I questioned myself constantly, wondering how I could be so blind, how I could trust so deeply without protection. He stayed, physically present, trying to act normal, cooking dinner, asking how my day was, as if routine could erase betrayal. Each time he touched me, my body reacted before my mind, pulling away from someone who felt unfamiliar. I hated that I still loved him. That part of me wanted to believe his apologies, his promises to end it, to be better. Love doesn't disappear instantly. It lingers painfully, clinging to hope even when logic begs you to let go. I was caught between the woman who loved him and the woman who finally saw the truth. That internal battle exhausted me more than any argument ever could. I understood then that betrayal creates two lives, the one before and the one after, and you never get to go back to the first one. The peak of everything came not with another confession, but with the moment I asked myself a question I had been avoiding. Could I live with this memory forever? Could I share my body again without hearing another name in my head? I imagined years ahead, holidays, ordinary mornings, and that single moment followed me into every future version of us. I realized the damage wasn't only what he did, but what it did to me. I no longer felt safe inside my own intimacy, and that loss felt unbearable. When I confronted him again, my voice was steady, almost cold. I told him I needed the full truth, not fragments designed to protect him. He admitted there were feelings, that it wasn't just physical, and in that instant the last piece fell into place. The tension I had felt for months finally had a face. I didn't scream, I didn't throw things. I felt empty, and that emptiness was clarity. Sometimes the loudest breaking point is silence, when your heart finally accepts what your mind already knows. That was the moment I understood that love alone is not enough to survive betrayal. After that confrontation, life felt like walking through fog, each step uncertain, each breath heavy. I couldn't sleep properly. Every night I replayed the moment over and over, hearing that name echo in the darkness. Friends asked if I was okay, and I smiled, because explaining this pain felt impossible. Even speaking it aloud made it more real, and I wasn't ready for the world to witness the collapse of my trust. I began to notice other things I had ignored before, little lies, hurried texts, vague excuses. They all made sense now, pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve until I had no choice. He tried to be normal, affectionate, present, but his attempts felt like shadows of the man I thought I loved. The intimacy that once felt sacred now became a reminder, each touch a warning. And the worst part was realizing that no matter how deeply I loved him, my heart had to protect itself first. That protection required distance, space, and a painful honesty I wasn't sure I could enforce. But I had to, because continuing as if nothing had happened would have destroyed the woman I still wanted to be. In the weeks that followed, I began to reclaim myself slowly, painfully, step by step. I stopped looking at him the same way, and I stopped pretending that everything could return to what it was. I re-examined my life, my desires, my boundaries. I realized that forgiveness doesn't always mean staying, and love doesn't always mean sacrifice. I started saying no to small things, asserting my space, protecting the part of me that had been crushed by betrayal. The nights were still hardest, silent hours when memories returned, when the sound of that name would wake me in a cold sweat, but each time I survived it, I felt a little stronger. I remembered friends who had warned me, instincts I had silenced, and I forgave myself for believing in the illusion. Healing, I learned, isn't linear. It's messy, confusing, and exhausting. Some days I wanted to scream, other days I just wanted to disappear. But slowly, I felt my heart recalibrate, learning to exist without the constant betrayal looming over it. And in that painful rebuilding, I started seeing that life after betrayal is not about forgetting. It's about choosing yourself in every small moment. One evening, after weeks of silence between us, I sat across from him, and for the first time, I felt a strange mixture of anger and relief. I realized I didn't need his explanations anymore. I had heard enough words, seen enough gestures. What I needed was clarity for myself. I told him that intimacy, trust, and honesty were non-negotiable for me, that one mistake could shatter 1,000 moments of love. I didn't shout, I didn't cry, at least not in front of him, but inside, a storm raged. I understood that love doesn't justify betrayal, and that being with someone who chooses another even once is a choice to harm you, whether intentional or not. I also realized that my anger wasn't just toward him, it was toward myself for ignoring my intuition, for believing that love alone could protect me. That night, I made a promise to myself no one would ever have the power to make me doubt my worth again. And in that promise, I found a fragile kind of freedom, the kind that trembles but refuses to break. I understood that the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be mine. After that night, I began to notice the subtle changes in myself, the way my body carried tension differently, the way my thoughts no longer wandered toward him with automatic trust. I started journaling, writing down every feeling, every fragment of memory that had once been blurred by denial. Seeing my pain on paper made it tangible, real, and strangely empowering. I allowed myself to cry without shame, to rage without guilt, to mourn a version of love that no longer existed. Slowly, I began to recognize my own strength, the part of me that had loved fully and still survived the unimaginable. Friends noticed the shift too. They said I looked sharper, more present, more alive in small ways. And they were right. I was learning that betrayal, while devastating, could also be a mirror, reflecting what I had always known but refused to see, that I deserved honesty above all, and that my heart, though wounded, was resilient. For the first time in months, I felt a cautious hope, the kind that whispers that life, even after heartbreak, can still be beautiful. As the weeks turned into months, I began to reclaim the spaces in my life that had been overshadowed by him. I returned to hobbies I had abandoned, started meeting friends I had neglected, and even traveled short distances alone just to remind myself that the world didn't end with betrayal. Each small act felt revolutionary, ordering my favorite coffee without checking if he would like it, laughing at jokes without worrying if he found them funny, sleeping alone without anxiety creeping in. I discovered that freedom isn't loud, it's subtle, like sunlight through a curtain after a storm. And yet, some nights the memories returned uninvited, the softness of his touch, the warmth of his voice, and that one impossible name echoing in my mind. Those moments stung, but they no longer defined me. I had learned to hold the pain without letting it consume me, to acknowledge the hurt without letting it dictate my choices. Life after betrayal is strange. It asks you to live with contradictions, to love yourself even when the world reminds you that someone else once chose differently. And slowly, I realized that I was doing just that, step by careful step. The turning point came unexpectedly, during an ordinary morning when the sun streamed through my window and everything felt sharper, more vivid. I realized I wasn't constantly thinking about him anymore. The weight of betrayal had loosened, replaced by a subtle pride in my own resilience. I no longer feared intimacy or doubted my worth, because I had faced the worst and survived. I remembered how I had blamed myself, questioned my instincts, and silenced my doubts, and I forgave that version of me, the one who only wanted to trust and love fully. I understood that the name he had spoken, the betrayal I had endured, was not a reflection of my value but of his choices. That clarity gave me freedom, the kind of freedom that whispers quietly but powerfully, reminding you that your life is yours alone. I began to imagine a future built on honesty, self-respect, and boundaries that protect my heart. And in that imagining, I felt the first real sense of peace I had known since that fateful night, a fragile but undeniable victory over the pain that once consumed me. As time went on, I started sharing my story with close friends, carefully choosing words that conveyed my pain and my growth. I realized that talking about it didn't make me weak, it made me human. Each retelling was a small act of reclaiming power, a way to transform hurt into wisdom. I noticed that with every conversation, the memory of that name lost some of its power over me. It no longer haunted every intimate moment or poisoned my trust in others. Instead, it became a lesson, a reminder of boundaries, intuition, and the necessity of self-respect. I began to focus on things that nourished me: reading, painting, walking in nature, and even rediscovering my own sensuality, not for someone else, but for myself. Intimacy became something I could approach again, cautiously but with openness, because I had learned that love isn't only about another person, it's about honoring yourself first. And in that gradual healing, I found a strength I hadn't known existed, a deep understanding that surviving betrayal can actually make you more capable of true love in the future. Eventually, I reached a point where I could see him without anger, without the sharp sting of betrayal slicing through me instantly. I still remembered that name, of course. I don't think I ever will forget it, but it no longer controlled my thoughts or dictated my emotions. I realized that forgiveness and acceptance don't necessarily mean reconciliation. They mean releasing the hold someone else's actions have over your life. I began to imagine a future untethered from the past, one where I could love again without fear, where I could be vulnerable without expecting harm. I started dating again slowly, testing the waters, reminding myself that intimacy doesn't have to be tied to pain. Every step forward was small but significant. And in that process, I rediscovered joy in small gestures, laughter without guilt, mornings without tension. The betrayal had left a scar, yes, but it had also carved out a space for growth, self-respect, and a deeper understanding of what I would and would not accept in love. It taught me that survival is not just about enduring, it's about reclaiming the life you thought was lost. Now, as I look back on everything, I see the journey not as a tragedy, but as a transformation. The woman I was before that night no longer exists, and that's okay, because she gave way to someone stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. I have learned to trust my instincts, to speak my truth, and to recognize that love should never require erasing yourself. The memory of his betrayal will always be a part of my story, but it no longer defines my happiness or my choices. I can love, laugh, and connect without fear because I have rebuilt my life on a foundation of honesty, respect, and self-love. And most importantly, I have learned that sometimes the hardest moments lead to the most profound growth. Betrayal hurts, yes, but surviving it teaches you who you really are, and that knowledge is more powerful than any heartbreak. I am no longer a victim, I am a survivor, and my heart, though scarred, is alive and open again. Thank you all for listening to my story. If you felt something in my journey, please don't forget to subscribe for more stories, like this video if it touched your heart, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss future episodes of Love Wave Story, because we'll continue exploring life, love, and the messy, beautiful truths that make us human. Remember, every story has a lesson, and every heart has the strength to heal. Until next time, take care of yourselves and never forget your worth.